Meow 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 meow. Meow 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 meow
Teacher.
meow meow meow. Meow 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 meow
Mm,
meow meow. Meow 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 meow. Meow 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 meow. Meow 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 meow. Meow meow
flight
meow meow.
attendant. Uh,
Meow meow
yeah.
meow
Meow,
meow
meow,
meow
meow,
meow
meow,
meow
meow,
meow.
meow,
Meow
meow,
meow
meow,
meow 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 meow
meow,
meow
meow,
meow
meow,
meow.
meow.
Kitty cat careers.
Careers.
Kitty cat careers.
Careers.
Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. This is episode 81. I'm one of your hosts, Hal Munger, and joining me now on the line is your inquisitive host, Julian Bernardo.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions today. It's going to be a very fun episode because we do have a guest today, despite what you all may be thinking. Those who have only heard the two voices on this pod so far. Uh, today our guest is going to be Hal, and we're going to be drilling Hal's brain about all of these new play choices, all the stuff that we've been talking about the past episodes. We're going to be getting it straight from the horse's mouth.
We've done these Julian and Hal guest episodes before. The last time I was on was a little bumpy, but last time Julian was on went really well. So I've learned from that, and I feel like it's just super important to talk about how the directing process works for a new play, and someone in your group's going to have to direct it. So we're going to dive into some specific stuff, but also producing, designing, and every other thing that I did.
Yeah, well, Hal, you're on the back foot because you do not have access to all the questions that I'm about to ask you. So, to start, I think a helpful way for listeners and just for us to orient this is I want you to just describe a new play, but I want you to describe it to two different people. So, first, I want you to tell me how you would describe a new play to a very experienced narrative improviser, but who has never heard of this concept.
Yeah, if you're an experienced narrative improviser who's never heard of this concept, um, how this will differ from narrative improv that you've encountered before is that it will be more theatrical, probably. It is trying to create a play that feels like a play. So, removing the elements of improv that sort of highlight the mistakes and the delight that comes from people making it up on the spot and trying to put on something that looks similar to something you might see scripted. But it is also different from ordinary improv in the degree to which it is improvised is bumped up one meta level. So most narrative improv shows revolve around some sort of structure that people practice together. And the goal for a new play is to put on a new play every night that is as different as possible from the previous night. And that difference might come in tone. One night might be comedic and one might be more dramatic. Emotions. It might involve totally different numbers of improvisers and different sets, costumes, props, different lengths. They can range anywhere from an hour to like 3 hours. And none of that and different narrative structures. It can make big jumps in time. It can happen all in one short thing. It can be very abstract and use a lot of imagery. It can be about real people or magical things. Anything can happen. So you have to learn how to play in any setting. And the final little piece that's different from normal improv is that about a third of the members of a new play are doing what you would normally consider to be improvising for stage. They're playing the characters in the show and acting out things. And then 2/3 of the company of a new play are improvising in other ways, whether that is accompanying on musical instruments, lighting, sound, or stage managing, or being a physical improviser who is coming out and building the set, changing the costumes, bringing out props, creating physical effects with their body, maybe doing puppetry, becoming props themselves. The
Yeah,
works.
Yeah, I think that would be sufficiently much for a narrative improviser to chew on. But yeah, I think that would be understandable. The other angle, or one other angle, is how would you describe this to someone who's very in like the theater world and is into like kind of experimental theater type stuff, but mostly thinks about improv as like an acting game?
Yeah. So I think that where this is similar to is devising.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can devising is where you create a play through an improvisational practice process, and then you hone it down and you revise it with an ensemble. Um, it's basically like getting very, very good at devising, uh, so that you can devise in real time, and you're training your participants to be able to think visually. Basically, like everyone is their own little mini director and designer and actor. So you're training people to be able to think visually and thematically and narratively and put on a play on the spot. that's
Yeah.
that's the goal. Is as similar as um, if you somehow already knew your lines and you already knew your blocking, what you would go out and do is what you do.
Yeah. And then finally, just how would you want to explain this to someone who isn't really in any sort of performative role or creative role, but is just interested to hear about what you're doing, like a family member or something?
Yeah. I'd say come watch two shows and see how they differ. I
Yeah.
would probably give a heads up that uh, it won't feel like other improv shows that you've seen, so don't expect that, and
Mhm.
that it might fail some nights,
Right.
uh, but that on nights when it hits, it's going to really work, and that it'll be very different every night.
Yeah. Um, that totally makes sense. I think one other thing, or just transitioning to the next thing, we've talked a lot about a new play, especially like debriefing over these past two episodes. So since we really have been in that sort of evaluative state, what do you generally see as the successes and of like the things to work on over the first run of a new play?
Yeah, so we did the first run now almost 2 years ago. Um, the successes were that we were trying something that had never been done before, that throughout the process we invented like upwards of 50 techniques for improvising that I've never seen done anywhere, and another probably 20 25 that I had never seen before, and now I've seen other people doing in other shows. So it's a great place for inventing things. I think all of us grew a lot and got a lot better. So it's a great
Mm-hmm.
way to improve at any type of improv. Um, I think that we created several very striking visuals throughout the night that I feel very proud of, and that we also created some scenes throughout the time that where there was lots of movement and coordination in a way that I think really wouldn't be possible. I think that we did a pretty successful job of having the shows be decently different. And it was just a massive undertaking to pull the thing off, where it's like
Right.
everyone came out of it with a lot of improv experience,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone went into it with a lot of improv experience and uh, just a ton of trust. I feel very proud of how the shows went and how they were created. Um,
Yeah.
Things to work on for next time are really about. I think pacing is the big thing that we've already said.
Mm-hmm.
Speeding up the pacing so that people are not scared to go on, or not having those kind of doubts that slow things down.
Right.
In this kind of show, I think because we were trying to make less mistakes, that it can be paralyzing, and people would take longer to process what was going on and make sure that what they were doing didn't conflict with something else that had already happened. Um, but I think working on just getting to the heart of the scene and what actually makes things exciting, and these kind of maybe advanced fundamentals of improv, so that um, it's dynamic and entertaining the entire run of the show, rather than having some parts of the show be really dynamic and entertaining. And it's hard to make an hour and a half long show be continuously be continuously delightful. But
Right.
I think that's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree based on our conversations pretty much with all of that. Um, I think something else that we noticed in rewatching the new plays was that there was a decent degree of similarity. Some of the shows like felt pretty similar. Going into that run, what do you think were like kinds of shows or types of shows that like we very well could have done with our training and whatnot at that time, but just we didn't end up doing? Like what are the big unexplored spaces?
I mean, we didn't do any meta shows. That was one thing we talked about of you know, big fourth wall breaks or that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we didn't do any like sort of farce, raucous comedy style things.
Right.
Um, we did an enormous amount of monologues, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's doing less of those and more group scenes would have had an effect. We didn't do anything that was just one continuous long scene or anything that was intergenerational. We didn't do anything where we were playing characters that were dramatically different from ourselves.
Right.
And we didn't do anything that was like very high on the action spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
or we didn't. I assume if you did millions of these things, eventually you'd start to get really weird ones, like where it became clear after the first scene that the whole show was going to be silent, or like that
Right.
everyone was an animal, or like just some of the weirder stuff. We didn't do anything that was super mythological, or we we had some narrator-esque things, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing super like that. Those are the big ones that come to mind of
Yeah.
things that could have happened. But I just think, yeah, just there weren't as many hard left turns and radical structures as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'd get more confident if we did more of them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, something that you kind of touched on that I've been thinking about with respect to a new play is that the fact that we had these four runs in 1 week, I think really colors the way that the shows materialize. Like, do you like in some ideal vacuum, like, do you think it makes more sense to do shows like back to back days, or do you think that there is some value to like a week gestation period or processing period or something in between shows?
Uh, I mean, I think if you're just trying to have a really good show, having a bunch back to back is helpful because there's the kind of improv wave concept of
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you have a really rough show, the next night people can really rally.
Right.
And the shows just have an effect on each other. And having that freshness of being like, oh, last show we were really slow. Let's really speed it up tonight is helpful. The period is also helpful, and we didn't get that. So I don't know. I'm about to this summer. I'm going to do 24 shows back to back, one every day. So like that'll do something totally different than. But I think the regularity thing, like a lot of the best groups in the world, do either a show every month or a show every year. Sorry, every week.
Mhm.
So I think that is telling that kind of reliability. Like I think the big thing is, regardless, 4 is not that many shows to do. And
Right.
one thing about a new play is we were practicing, like I was practicing 15 hours a week for it. So if you just ratio that to doing 4 shows, like that's the highest practice to show ratio
Right.
that I've ever encountered. So in some ways it felt like obviously a lot of the stuff we practiced didn't make it into the shows. Whereas if we had uh, the theater, like a new play is technically intensive. So it kind of requires being done in a run because you need to
Mhm.
load in and have a set and have all this stuff.
Right.
So if you're going to do all that work, you might as well do a bunch of shows back to back.
Yeah. In this concept of like, let's say it were on some like monthly cadence let go back to weekly cadence actually, like, do you think, because I mean, since it was just one run, there was clearly the rehearsal period and then the show period. And we weren't really rehearsing in between. We'd had some, long practice or, some warm
Mhm.
ups and stuff that were helping. But if it were on some lighter cadence like that, how would you think about, let's say you were still directing, running those rehearsals in between shows? Like, would you? I think, for example, with the little cases that we had for other formats in college, like there's maybe some idea of, oh, okay, let's get one rehearsal in between the weekends, and on in that rehearsal we like note down this is the thing that we're sort of week on, and we drill that. Would you think about it in the same way, or since it's a totally different form, would it be less focused on like specifically targeting the weak areas from existing shows?
So the goal of a new play was to do something that was felt like theater and to emulate theater. So the idea behind it was to make it so that the practices were timed more similarly to what other it was a university show, what the other university theater ensembles were doing, and most of them would have, practice most nights a week or on the weekends, and most university improv groups have practices, at best we had twice a week. Some people have once a week, for like 2 hours. So it's a big difference to be practicing for like 3 or 4 hours many nights of the week. And I think that there's a reason that most plays don't do the thing where they're like once a week for in that a lot of practice goes into creating the show, and then once you have the show, a lot less practice is needed to maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, if a new play is trying to keep it really spicy, you could keep on doing it. But I do think the best way to do it would be to a lot of practice than the shows, because it allows you to not be thinking about, not be as in your head when you're performing, and not be having as much new information being added still at the performance moment.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I buy. I think it would be characteristically different if it was something we were just doing for like 3 months, right? Like there's a sense in which, I don't know, it feels like we would need to inject something, or I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but the fact that it all happened in that week made the whole experience feel like the experience of doing a new play in a lot of ways felt in line with the ethos of a new play, where it's like wildly different and like intense and like in your face and in a certain way, compared to normal improv. And there's like having it on a weekly basis, like feels like it would neuter that in some way, that like a fire might need to be lit to keep that.
Yeah. I mean, it just in general, I feel like a lot of improv is not that is not that good.
Right.
And I think people often attribute that to the whole art form. But
Mm-hmm.
at least my mindset going into new play is like, what would scripted plays look like if you practiced, once a week for a couple of weeks with a bunch of people who hadn't really done it before, or had, 1 to 2 years of
Right.
experience and didn't have any technical effects?
Yeah.
And like the answer is that they wouldn't look that good. And there's a big question of like, how do, like, it's possible that if you give improv the same amount of resources that you give to plays, that it just still will be worse. But it's really hard to model that because we don't have people who have been trained in improv since the age of 4, and
Right.
gone to, a 4-year degree where they were studying primarily improv, and then worked a career where they were practicing improv all day for their career, or performing, like those just aren't, that talent pool does not exist. And in order for that to exist, there would have to be someone who showed that it was viable.
Right.
There would have to be groups, and it's starting to now, where like there are groups like Ostentatious or Showstopper that are doing commercial improv. So it's possible, and I think that the more it open, like it already is, that there are more kid classes, and that there are more ways to make it so that you can be paid to do improv, but that's going to keep growing over time.
Do you think that since improv is often this like side thing that people have, that informs the shape and the type of improv that people do? I mean, like a lot of improv in the world is like very humor focused, kind of Armando or Harold style stuff. Do you think that like maybe you're just not like super artistically interested in those forms, but do you think that those forms have space to get elevated? And
Yeah.
not even necessarily those forms specifically, but like, uh, it's just interesting that we tried this experiment of doing a lot of improv, but doing it in this super narrative form. And it just makes me
Mhm.
curious to see what it would look like to do a new play, but for, theater games or something like that. Right.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I feel like that's already been done. Like the people who are very, very good at doing a herald
Right.
actually have, for the most part, dedicated a lot of time to doing that. But I think that um, the like I was just talking to someone who was talking about soccer and like if you or football, if you are playing with people who are worse than you, or just generally who are not practicing very much, you develop a lot of habits of not trusting the other people,
Right.
and you in that way get worse, and you start playing in a different way. So I think similarly with narrative stuff, um, if you are used to playing in an environment where people are generally not listening to each other and the narrative's going to go off the rails and people are kind of, then you adapt and learn how to play in a way that's going to be fun with those people. And that involves getting goofier and less committed to care. Like if I'm going to say do something really committed or vulnerable and then you're not matching that, it's going to look weird to the audience. So I think that a lot of stuff devolves to the lowest common denominator, which is like the kind of anarchy improv, like a montage, which is delightful, but nothing that I do in a montage is going to it's not going to like affect, like I can do whatever I want to do in a montage regardless of what you're doing.
Right.
And with a new play, the idea was to up that level pretty high, where a lot of times you would be, one of the things we did to practice was I would put my arm out and I would say counterbalance and then I would fall over.
Right.
And someone in the group would have to leap forward and grab my arm and keep me from hitting the ground.
Yeah.
And so making these kind of moves that were highly trusting of the people around you,
Mm-hmm.
where you come out on stage and do something that will not work unless someone comes out and supports it.
Right.
And sometimes you do that and it doesn't work and it feels bad. But at the very least, it opens up what's possible to be done with it. And I think, like similarly with the Rubik's Cube, I used to like to solve it a lot. You can a lot of people, when they learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube, learn to always put together the white side first. And it just helps memory wise to be like, okay, I put together the white side first, then I do the other sides, and then I do the yellow side at the end. If you get extremely good, that's how I solve a Rubik's Cube. If you get extremely good and you're trying to go really, really fast, you can examine the cube, and one of the six sides will naturally be easier to complete if you
Mm-hmm.
start with that side. But your brain will be like a little confused of like, oh, I was supposed to, like, I'm used to doing the
Right.
yellow one last. So you can train in a way, and similar with juggling, like your left hand usually gets worse than your right hand. But if you want to train as quickly as possible and get as good quickly as possible, you should rely on those dominant methods, like starting with a white side or having your right hand do more of the work.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to get really, 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 really good, or get really, 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 really good as quickly as possible, you should start with the correct form.
Right.
Like, rather than starting playing guitar with the wrong form and then being at some point being like, okay, I want to get better. I'm going to try to learn the right, and I'm going to undo all these bad habits. Uh, there's something to be said. And right now in the improv world, like pretty much everyone is starting with the form that is specifically, like most people start with short form and then go to like this kind of mid form, like the comedy 30-minute stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe go to narrative if they want to. So I don't know. It's hard to find people with the right
Right.
the right habit set. But I mean that's part of the fun was like, and part of why it was really challenging and why it was very risky to do what we were doing was because none of us had the skill set to do what we were doing.
Right.
So it was very much like an experimental process, and that's how it's going to be if you want to take a swing at it. It's kind of fun to be trying to climb a really tall mountain or whatever. Just be like, what happens if we do the right form? Obviously, it'll be worse than a normal show, but it might lead to
Right.
something better.
to dissect this, just yeah, the concept of doing a lot and trying to get really good. And, the fact that we did a new play in the style of theater, I think, really colored what we did on stage, how we, yeah, just the stories that we told. But the majority of our narrative improv background together had been, I would say, closer to emulating movies than emulating plays. Do you think? What is your thought for that sort of space of less theatrical, but still heavily narrative improv, but done at this level where you're doing a lot of it? Do you think that it looks like a just much cleaner and much more advanced form of what we were doing with The Sims, or do you think that there are characteristic changes that come with doing it a lot and doing it with people who have really good form?
Um, I mean, the reason I think it makes sense to emulate plays is because, like, at least the physical techniques of plays, you can learn how to do them and learn how to improvise them.
Right.
Like, there's no way that you're going to learn how to do the special effects of movies until like AI gets good enough that you can say something piratey and look like you have a pirate beard on or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
But the big advantage to basing your thing around movies is that if you're improvising in a group full of young people, chances are you've seen a lot of movies, whereas chances are you haven't seen a lot of plays. And I think that part of why sometimes our things felt like over dramatic or stilted or boring or like, had these things in was actually because we were going more on the idea of like what a play should be rather than like what plays actually are.
Right. Yeah.
And like, I don't think that we had seen that many plays as a group. And it's similar to like Shakespeare. I feel like when people's perception of Shakespeare is that it's very slow and boring and kind of arcane.
Right.
But most productions of Shakespeare are trying to actively fight against that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when you go see it, it's actually just very fun and delightful and followable if it's done well.
Yeah.
And I think a new play in its ideal form is similar to that, where you go see it and it just feels clear and followable and done well. And it like pretty much every play should be funny. Like almost every, like no matter how serious the topic is, will have humor because that's just one of the emotional states of people.
So then do you think like it's just not a super worthwhile venture to go hard down the line of emulating movies via improv? Just, it makes sense that it's not like a staged medium.
No, I think movies are great. Again, like I said, I do think that within the next 10 to 20 years, you're going to be able to improvise with CGI special effects, which is cool.
Yeah.
And so that's something to think about. But also, again, I think that for most groups, the trade-off of the shared knowledge that you can get by emulating movies is worth more than the trade-off of learning how to do the play effects. And even just like, I just went to see My Neighbor Totoro, which was a stage play that was basically a shot-for-shot remake of the movie using theatrical effects to make the movie effects, So you could easily do shows that were like that, where this feels like a movie. We're using stage effects to make the movie effects.
Right.
And we're getting big puppets and balloons and crazy lighting. And in fact, those Totoro and Spirited Away were the two theater shows that I've seen that had the most techniques. Where watching them, I was like, you could put that in a new play. You could put that in a new play. You could, because they have like 20 to 40 puppeteers who are wearing all black and making all the effects happen. And it's just like, oh, those are physical improvisers. And I even like learned, like I saw they have these special black puppeteer things that go over their face, kind of like a veil, and they bring them up sometimes and put them down sometimes. And this little hat that holds them in the right way. And I was like, okay, if I ever do a new play again, obviously the physical improvisers are going to have those.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that transitions into kind of what I wanted to ask, which was, since doing a new play, you specifically have went out and like seen a lot of improv that is like done in the world, and a lot of like really good improv. And so after like venturing out, and I guess not just improv, just seeing other like theatrical work, does that change the way that you think about a new play? And like what are the things that you've seen in the improv world that like make you excited to iterate on a new play, I guess?
yeah, I think that a big thing is that like the age of the people that I'm watching play has jumped by the average age, probably by like 15 to 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big difference, and being aware of our age as improvisers, and always in general, like when I am assessing how am I doing as an improviser, I always try to cross reference about other people who are my age, and I think that um, any art that we make now is going to feel a little younger.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that it's going to feel high energy. And like we have a lot of, there's a youthfulness that I think is delightful about like a Stanford Improviser show. But I think that as you get older and experience more of life, that you're able to depict more things based on your
Right.
experiences.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that's one big shift. I've seen a lot more shows that were directed a lot more intentionally, specifically with theater in mind, and specifically designed, and that unlocks a very powerful space. And while I love the idea of improvising design that we were doing in New Play, ultimately there were design choices being made, like which props, and they were for us they were being made randomly based on what junk I found to paint white. But if you wanted to, you could, and this is like if you had a month between each New Play, you could really make a careful set that was a lot more planned out and was obviously indicative of some things, and then still improvise having never seen that set. But yeah, what happens if you make the whole set covered in snow very clearly from the first second it comes out, and you all the costumes are big coats and all this other stuff? That will change. So that will change the show dramatically. So I think that I've seen a lot more shows that are like that, where they had a very specific place and they were able to make it feel very real by casting people who were roughly the age background of the characters that they were trying to depict, and cast and spending a long time studying whatever topic they were trying to talk about. So those things all strike me as important. And then also just honing those stage skills of being clear and confident.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Thinking about like specific design and trying to curate each given a new play in a certain direction, like uh do you like where is your like just preference zone? Like we were talking with Lana about this a little bit, but for it on with yourself and doing improv yourself, like trying forms that are a lot more specified, and there's a lot more defined. Are you like it's yeah, I'm sure you acknowledge that it can lead to really interesting things, but does it interest you? Does it not interest you?
Yeah, it definitely interests me. And I think that like one of the big things that I've done since a new play is the Thorn and Pedal Stick and all the Shakespeare improv.
Mm-hmm.
And it is weird, and it's imbalancing the way that I improvise to the fact that I've now probably logged like a third of my improv hours total doing Shakespeare improv,
Yeah,
like
right.
that maybe not that extreme, but it's something like that. And but it helps you in a different way. Like I never imagined the idea of playing in meter before, and like that really unlocks something very new. And you can only do that if you specify pretty hard. And I think that I'm a little. I do what is going to be fun and what I like to do, and I'm very scattered, and I like to do a lot of things. So
Yeah.
like the idea of giving up things like musical improv that are fun, but that I'm not ever going to be an expert in would be a little sad. So obviously, if you're going to have a Broadway show that was an improv musical, you need to have super specialized people for it. But
Right.
personally, I like the range, and that's why a new play is structured the way it is. And I'm willing to sacrifice a little on quality to make it really engaging and fascinating to perform in.
Yeah. We come from a very specific like school of improv, and like kind of a different school of improv than a lot of people, like the sort of Bay Area improv downstream of, Dan Klein and Lisa, and then like coming up in the Simps. How much do you think that your personal like improv ideology and takes and whatnot are like very well explained by being downstream of that? And like what parts of your opinions do you think differ from what we came up in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an improv weirdo. I started out improv in high school with a teacher who was very into the idea of theatricality, narrative, and that kind of stuff. And the only improv shows that I watched for the first 4 or 5 years that I was doing improv were TJ and Dave, who are some of the best improvisers in the world.
Right.
So that's just what I thought improv was. Then I happened to wind up in what my understanding is basically the only narrative improv university group in the country that I've encountered so far. And at a moment where that group was taking improv very, very seriously, and where there were people who were willing to show and practice a lot. And that has to do with the fact that Bay Area theater sports was, my understanding, I think it's 89 or whatever. 1989 is the first narrative improv show as we think of it. So, and I think that it happened. I haven't found a documentation of an earlier one, and that was there. So it's one of these local hubs. There are other local hubs around the U.S. The West Coast in general is more that way, especially the Northwest. But also Austin, Texas has a scene, and I think Florida does as well. And obviously Chicago has some narrative stuff just because they're so home base of all improv. And then after that, I wound up doing I'm living in London now and interacting with the Europe scene, which is very theatrical based because there's great funding for theater and because there's a festival in every city. And like it's a lot of cities are close together and traveling, and a lot of people travel more there. So the system encourages people to make applications that sound interesting and are pushing boundaries in that way. So I've been hopping back and forth between places, and it just so happens that the places that I've hopped to have been extremely narrative focused. So I don't know, if I ever moved to like Chicago or LA, then maybe it would be a different story. And New York is the one exception. But
right. I guess though, to zoom in a little bit on like the specific training that we got in college, like I would imagine that there are things that you diverge from that school because obviously we like doing narrative improv, and that's yeah, that's a unifying thing. But I guess it feels like coming up like through the Simps, it was big focus on, I guess, directly maybe the like improv maxims from Improv Wisdom, and I think very like TAPS 103 oriented, where a lot of like since it's like a group with high cycle, like a lot of the wisdom comes from those classes, and those classes are directed at beginners. And so, for example, I remember coming in and like, oh, like Happy Healthy was like a very like strong thing that maybe got like bent over time as we like got older and got more influence. But do you think, yeah, like I guess, are there parts of that you felt like you chafed with at various times? And do you, where do you stand now with respect to those things that you potentially chafed with?
I mean, I think a big chafe is just relaxing and having fun and viewing it as something that's done for enjoyment. And I've gotten a lot better about that. Basically just reading the room, and new play was a big advance in that setting, where rather than trying to make a bunch of people who didn't want to do a new play, it was make an additional space where people who wanted to do this could join.
Right.
And I think that I always chafe against structure. I like freedom, and I again am super process oriented, and specifically process oriented about like maximizing the improv that I'm going to do probably like in my 30s, or 40s. So at the very least, taking a longer term approach and trying, like I said, trying to practice in a way that builds fundamental skills to do things that are really difficult in the future, rather than playing in a way that's going to make the show as reliable as possible in the present.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah. I think just the addiction to it and this, like, I just love this stuff. That's a cheat. And also, like, sometimes I get way too in my head and do really badly because of that. I get over attached to things. So sometimes I bomb out all the time. The more and more my identity becomes like, oh, improv is this thing that I do. Oftentimes the worse I get, and then I have to learn to relax again.
Yeah. Um, as we get on, I'm going to transition to some sort of like more localized questions, not necessarily lightning round, but uh, what was your favorite physical improv construction that happened over the sequence of a new play?
My favorite one was the shower that I got to be a part
Yeah,
of.
yeah,
I just loved that the curtain became the towel, and that there were
right.
multiple physical improvisers involved, but the curtain becoming the towel really felt like that shower was actually better than just having a shower on stage.
Right.
Whereas the car, it's like, obviously if you had actually had but the car is a close runner up. Car was awesome.
Yeah. Do you think that like yeah, how much space do you think there is? Maybe we've talked about this in some of the earlier episodes in the season, but how much space do you think there is for physical improvisers in non like theatrical formats and more goofy formats?
So much. It's just about like how many people in the world are trained. The physical improvisers need to be trained as an ensemble.
Right.
They need to have the same rough set of skills. But if you had a group of talented physical improvisers and you had 3 hours to sort of teach another improv group how to interact with them, they would make any show way better.
Do you think that physical improvisers, how much like improv training do you think a physical improviser needs? Like, were we to transition into a world where physical improvisers are pretty common, would you be happy to audition a bunch of people who've never done improv for your physical improviser ensemble?
Certainly. In general, I feel like improv requires a lot less training. Like, I know that's totally contradictory with what I'm saying, but I spend an enormous amount of time trying to get better at improv, and I don't really find that it makes me that much better than the people around me. So I don't know. I think that a little bit of time with a really good director is probably a lot more worthwhile than like years just sort of mucking about.
Right.
And I think people should just go right ahead and try it, and that's how you invent new things. Is like, even the ensemble that I'm coaching at the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival, like both years that I'm running it, I've had at least one person who's never done improv before, and always they have Shakespeare experience, and then at least one person who's never done Shakespeare before who has improv, and the people teach each other, and it keeps it fresh.
I think the cross pollination is so important. Like, yeah, between different skills and then also like different types of improv. I think it's like hard. Sometimes, like in college, it's like, oh, they don't do the improv we like. But if you can play with people who are good and have their own distinct ensemble vibe, I think it's very fun to see because there's all of these intangibles. I feel like that a group who's on each other's wavelength, like two groups who are equally on like their wavelength, will communicate and do things in very different ways. And so, yeah, I totally am with that cross pollination of different types.
Yeah.
Back to more lightning round stuff. What was your favorite monologue throughout the new play sequence?
Will as the frog. Use the stone I gave you. I thought that was great, but Anna also ripped a million, and Jada's final one with that evening is also very nice.
What do you think is the minimum and maximum size for a new play? Both, like, it would be nice to break it down by character, physical, and then even the outside, like more musical as well, and then also the sort of production roles.
Yeah, I mean, main character is one, but you'd have to have a lot of physical improvisers, and you might want the physical improvisers to speak. But it would be more about like sort of one person show telling a monologue. Min physical improvisers. I feel like obviously you could run a good new play if you had a good cast without physical improvisers, but in order for it to really feel like good, I feel like 3. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, to me, that was like, next time I do it, I'd love to do 5. And after seeing Totoro, I was kind of like, I'd love to do 20, because it just opens up what is possible.
What about Max?
Oh, Max is no Max. Uh, then for characters, Max like maybe like 15 or 20. Physical improvisers, no Max. Musicians, 1 man max is probably like, it's hard to, I don't know. If you had like the best jazz band in the world, maybe you could get away with like 10, but I think it would be pretty hard. Lighting probably is like min 1, max 2. Sound is probably a similar thing. Although if you divided the roles of what sounds people were responsible, you could up that a lot. And more stage managers would make everything easier. So
yeah.
it depends on your space, your venue.
How much do you think, because I think a common struggle we face, like when trying to add production elements to improv shows, is the potential to get distracted. As a improviser. How are you thinking about this in a new play? Do you think we were distracted by spotlights and props and that kind of thing? Do you think that there's space to do more of it and not get distracted, or do you think it's just about the way that you practice?
Yeah, I mean, with all these things like meter, and it's like, if it's making the improv worse, stop doing it and then get better at improv, and then
right.
check back in. And obviously, it would have been better if we'd practiced with the lighting rig a lot more, because then we would have been standing in the spots of the stage where we were lit, and that wasn't the case. And it would have been better if backstage it was clearer to see what was going on stage. Like, part of why night 3 went wrong was just because I was putting on a complicated costume and couldn't really hear what was going on stage. So yeah, like all of those things can be they can be a distraction, but they also can make it so that you feel more real. Like, ideally, the whole point of a new play is that everything feels really real as a character, and that things that are scary look scary, and that you're having physical things to interact with that make things feel real. So that I think there's a real advantage to all of this stuff as well that shouldn't be understated.
Yeah, totally. Do you think in an ideal world where you just have infinite access to people, do you think that the director role should be separated from being an onstage improviser, physical or character? Or do you think that it doesn't really matter, and that someone can occupy those roles fine?
I was just talking to Valerie about it, and I think that the big advantage of having things be internally directed is, especially if the director rotates, is that everyone then gets more of a say in what's happening. And the big advantage of having an external director is that people do not have, there's a clear status, and it's less personal, and doesn't feel insulting if someone's giving you feedback, or frustrating if they're giving you feedback that favors them or the way they like to play. I ran into a lot of trouble directing a new play and improvising it at the same time. And that, I think that was one of the primary reasons that people were chafing against, or I'm not sure if it was actually one of the primary reasons. I think there were underlying reasons, but at moments when people were most frustrated, I think that had a lot to do with it. I think the other thing that was, like, one of the biggest things I've learned doing a new play was, as a director, how important emotions are, not as in character emotions, but as in like people emotions and the vibe of the room. And it, like, conveying like the right thing to people, to telling someone, here's what you need to do, very accurately, does not help them do it better. It does to some extent, but and knowing what to do does not necessarily mean you can do it. And not knowing what to do does not necessarily mean that you won't accidentally do it. So, like, if you're in, especially with improv, so much of it is, can the ensemble be delivered to the minute that the performance starts with everyone in an emotional state where they're relaxed, confident, and connected. And and this is why a lot of times practicing a lot can make you worse, is that if practices are not putting you in that emotional direction, even if you are building skills, your show is going to be worse. So with a new play, I was trying to produce it at the same time as direct it. And I was trying to also design it and just do all the logistical work for it, or like a lot of the logistical work for it. So I would show up to practice not really having slept and not really having eaten and just generally stressed.
Yeah.
And like now I worked at a preschool now for a year and a half, and the energy, the emotional energy of a room is much more visible. If one of the teachers comes in grumpy, the kids go crazy. And if one of the teachers comes in grumpy, sometimes if you notice that and you feel that energy, there's a way that you can adjust the energy in the room by adjusting your energy. And there were some people who were really good at it, like Mr. Robert, who we had on the podcast. Like a lot of his job was just kind of walking around the preschool and noticing which corners had the kind of crazy energy, and just coming in and with his shoulders relaxed and taking deep breaths and a big smile and kind of just making the energy of the room work again. So that's what I mean. That's what one of the big things that I focus on now is noticing when things need a reset and when people need connection and just games, and letting go of the pushing of like skills at those moments, because they're not that important.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like one of the hardest parts of being a director is like, you're not just improv teacher, you're ensemble manager, which can be very difficult. I think overall, we've covered most of the things that I was interested in asking, but over this conversation, it strikes me like, what in your head is the future of a new play? Do you think you want to try to get a group to do it again at some point? Do you want to keep it like on ice until you feel like it is like new, different, and good? Like if there were people, for example, like this summer who are trying to do it, would you be like, oh, let's just like do it again right now?
Julian, that's a trap question. I asked Julian about doing it this summer, and he vetoed. So that's why I'm doing something else this summer. I think that the future, I feel like I've changed enough as a person that I'm already ready to do it again. And I've already come up with tons of new ideas for it. If another group wanted, like, again, if another group watched the videos and saw it and was like, I see the power of this format and I want to try to do it really well, I would love it if someone else did it. I think that in order to actually do it well, I would need to return to a location where I was in the same place as a number of people who had been playing together for a number of years, or stay in one location long enough for that to be true. So I don't know. I just block theater, which I think is the best improv theater in the world, just changed their structure so that now they have a regular ensemble more similar to Bats, and they did auditions, and it'll be interesting to see how that adjusts things. But I think that eventually building, like I at some point really hope to start an improv community and to be teaching classes regularly and to be putting on shows regularly with members of that improv community. And similar to the podcast, once we've built up a lot of other shows that are a little simpler, then the next step will of course be to try a new play again.
We talk a lot about on this podcast and on this one and in general on all of them, the visions that we have for how improv in the world could be, if people focus up hard on it. And, there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time improvising. What would be your like ideal improv landscape in 25 years in America, let's say?
25 years. It would be awesome if there was a professional training program that was somewhat accessible, that was at least a year long, that was full-time improv. That would be sick. It would be awesome if there were more narrative improv theaters in the US. It would be awesome if there was a festival scene in the US similar to what is in Europe. It would be awesome if there were, a couple commercial shows that were successful. Like, I don't think that those things are necessarily going to happen in the next 25 years. But it would also be awesome if there were more kids programs like what Cindy Ong directs. I think that's how any of the other stuff will get possible. But improv is such a young art, or narrative improv is such a young art form. Like being 35 years old or whatever is, again, we don't know what anyone looks like who has been doing narrative improv for longer than 35 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some people have been doing shorter narrative stuff, like and stuff that was verging on it. And again, can shoot me an email if you have been doing it for if you were doing narrative improv in the 70s, shoot me an email. But yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly think that by the time I'm 80, assuming geopolitical disaster doesn't happen, like I'll be able to go see shows that are way better than the shows I can go see now. And yeah, all that takes is for it to find a niche where there is, for some reason, commercial success that people are achieving in improv. And I don't know how that's going to happen. I'm certainly not going to be the person who makes improv commercially successful, because that's not really where my focus is. But if someone else does, but it's possible that it might mutate in a way that I hate and find huge, UCB, I'm not trying to bash them, but they found huge commercial success teaching a lot of people to play in a very specific way. And it's possible that improv will look super different in the future, and it won't look more like how I like it, because I'm not sure the way that I like is commercially successful. So
one potential future, as we get close to closing, that I see just, is like the LA, like dropout, like Smosh style teams of like, I don't know, sort of like influencer adjacent, pretty comedy focused, game focused improv. That to me seems like right now where the commercial success is. But yeah, how do you feel about those things? I feel like we've touched on them lately.
I don't feel super strongly about them. I haven't watched them. I probably should, and there's probably more stuff to learn. But again, cause I'm hoping, like, cause it's so young, I feel like the right thing to do is vary pretty heavily, and the right thing to do is to learn as much as possible from things that aren't improv. So yeah. I don't know. But yeah, I think that maybe one last little piece is that doing great improv, like ultimately it's the thing that people do to connect with each other and to feel good and to like, and if you ever lose sight of that, which is easy to do if you're getting too intense about it, that sucks.
Yeah.
So that's my big journey right now is having fun and worrying a lot less about the things besides is this fun. And for me, a certain level of technical proficiency is necessary for fun, but trying to maximize on people feeling good, I think, is the big thing.
Well, I have to commend you for truly like forming improv communities. I mean, the improvised Shakespeare Festival, is that what it's? Unscripted
Shakespeare Festival. Company, do not sue us. Do not sue us.
Unscripted Shakespeare Festival, Thorn and Pedal Stick, and then just obviously the way at Stanford that you very clearly tried to identify people who could be really into improv and loop them into the world. You are a community builder, and that must be commended, because that is, like you say, at the core of doing improv. So
yeah, that's a fun thing. And I think the big thing is just, I would love for the improv scene to look different than it does right now. And like, I don't know, there's a certain way right now that a lot of improvisers look like. There's almost like a texture of like what makes someone an improviser. And there are just so many people who don't fit that texture, who are really great at it, like who would be really great at it, but who don't try it because they don't see themselves as following that exact culture. And I would love to see just what happens if more distinct voices wind up improvising.
Yeah. Well, let that be the call to action. Do you have anything you want to shout out where we were at?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be in the UK this summer, or near Edinburgh, I'm going to be doing a show there. It's going to be an improvised duo-prov Shakespeare show with Thorn and Pedalstick, but the duo version. And if you know anyone who's going to be near there, please tell them, because we're trying to publicize. And stay tuned. If you missed the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival this year, stay tuned for next year, because it's going to be a ton of fun.
You better show up. Well, then, without further ado, this has been Muprov
Musings. So my sign off is that I just did my first practice with Valerie Ward. She's one of the teachers from the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival. She was in Parallelogram Phonograph, which is the longest running, well, I guess they may not be the longest running narrative improv group, the longest running 4-person narrative improv group in the United States. They've been doing a show every week for 20 years. I don't really think that anyone else can hold that title, although Three for All, and there's some other groups that maybe have been around longer. And it was really great. The Unscripted Shakespeare Festival hasn't happened at the moment of recording. It will have happened at the moment of release. But it's always fun to add another really powerful improviser to someone that you've played with. And by the end of the practice, the scenes were just so much better than they were at the start of the practice. And that's a testament to someone who's doing a good job.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What is like Valerie's flavor of improv?
Very narrative based, similar to a lot of the things that we would discuss about, like, have a platform, start with your everyday situation and then develop, was what we were doing on the first day, but said in a very clear way. And a lot of what she was doing was observing us play. And trying to get a sense of it and then give feedback based on what we were doing. So again, it was the first thing. It wasn't a super deep dive. But again, that emotional management is really important. Where at the beginning, everyone was clearly really nervous and doing worse improv than they normally do. And by the end, people were somehow more relaxed than they normally were and doing better improv than they normally do. So if you're in New York, she is basically the only person in New York who can teach you narrative improv. So reach out.
Awesome.
I've got a question. Can people go to the Julian B website without subscribing to the Julian B? Is that hidden information?
No, they can. They should.
So that's another little thing, is that I got my Julian B this week. And Julian has a website.
Yeah, go to thejulianb.github.io to go check it out.
The julianb.github.io. Wow, yeah, there it is. And there's so much stuff that you've worked on, although your songs are not on here.
Yeah, I'm holding them. I think I want to clean them all up and then drop 4 at once as one thing. And then, but then
all 4.
I have 3 right now, and I want to make one more and make them all clean and make them good.
Okay. Don't clean up that first one too much.
Okay.
Part of its charm is that it was the first one. And in fact, like, when I've shown them to several people, universally, I think people laugh a lot more at the first one than the second one. And enjoy it more. So there's something to be said. It's that mix of experiences where you can get something nice from the more experienced people, but sometimes the less experienced people really give you what you want.
That's Shella True.
Shella True.
Can't you see me now? And times they are changing. You know, things are rearranging. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now?